Here is part 1, written according to your request. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The hallways of Oak Ridge High always had a certain smell after lunch. A mix of old books, industrial cleaner, and a faint, sweet trace of someone's leftover fries. It was a Tuesday, and the last period bell had just rung, releasing a river of backpacks and chatter into the corridors. Near the auditorium, a boy stood by himself, looking at the closed doors. His name was Leo. He was a sophomore, and if you asked most kids in school to describe him, they'd struggle. Quiet, they might say. The kid with the green backpack. The straps on that backpack were frayed, and one was held together with a safety pin. He wasn't part of a club, didn't try out for sports teams. He moved through the school like a shadow, listening more than he spoke. He was staring at the auditorium doors because sometimes, when the janitor was cleaning, he'd leave them unlocked. And if you slipped in, the huge silent space felt like a different world. Most of all, Leo looked at the doors because of what was behind them. A grand piano, big and black and shiny as a deep pool of water got. He didn't get to see it today. The doors were locked tight. With a small, almost invisible sigh, he adjusted his backpack and turned to leave. He didn't see the man watching him from the other end of the hall. Principal Lawrence Vander stood with his arms crossed, his suit jacket perfectly buttoned. He was a man who believed a school should run like a nice, quiet business. Test scores were the product, students were the workers, and the school's reputation was the brand. He liked things that looked good. Trophies in clean cases. Neat lawns. Students from good families who gave impressive speeches. A boy like Leo, lingering by the auditorium, was just a smudge on the picture. Vander was about to turn away when an idea, slow and mean, began to uncurl in his mind. It wasn't a fully formed thought yet. It was more of a feeling, a memory of the board, smug laughter from a meeting he'd just left. He'd been with the heads of the student council. They were his favorites, polished, popular, kids whose parents he played golf with. They'd been planning the big spring showcase, the last event before finals. It was always the same. A few choir numbers, the jazz band, a dance team routine, some poetry. Worthy but boring, predictable. We need something to liven it up. One of the seniors, a boy with perfect teeth, had said, something memorable. They'd all laughed then, a knowing laugh. They'd talked about silly skits, maybe a funny video, but it hadn't felt like enough. Vander wanted a moment, a story people would tell, something that would break the monotony and make him seem like a principal who encouraged spontaneity. Now looking at Leo, the idea snapped into place, sharp and clear. He walked back to his office, his shoes clicking on the linoleum. He called in the student council president and vice president, a girl who always wore the school colors, and a boy with a confident smile. Sit, Vander said, a grin playing on his lips. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I think I've found our memorable moment for the showcase. He laid it out for them. They would call it a spotlight on unsung talent. During the show, he would personally call up a student someone no one expected, someone with no known talent. He would make a big, encouraging speech about how every student has a gift. Then he would ask this student to play the grand piano. But what if he can't play? The vice president asked, a flicker of confusion on his face. That's the point, the president said, her eyes lighting up with cruel understanding. She got it immediately. The awkward walk to the stage. The long silence, him just staring at the keys, maybe hitting a few terrible notes. The whole audience holding their breath. Then she made a soft oof sound, like air leaving a balloon. It'll be the most talked about thing all year. Not mean, just funny. Awkward funny. Principal Vander nodded, his grin widening. Exactly. It's a harmless prank. A bit of school spirit. He'll be a good sport about it. And everyone gets a great story. He didn't say the other part, the part he thought. It would make him seem daring. A principal with a sense of humor who could orchestrate a moment everyone would remember. They decided on Leo. He was perfect. Unknown, quiet, no friends to defend him. He looked like he'd never seen a piano, let alone played one. The student leaders loved the idea. It felt like an inside joke for the whole school, one they were in on from the start. The next step was the invitation. It had to look official, or the boy might not show up. Vander had his secretary type up a formal letter on school letterhead, ***, to Leo Mitchell ***, from the office of the principal ***, subject. Participation in Spring Showcase ***. You have been selected for a special performance segment in this year's Spring Showcase. Your participation is requested and valued. Please report to the principal's office at 3:15 p.m. today for details. Leo got the note in his last period history class. The teacher handed it to him with a slightly puzzled look. Leo stared at the crisp paper, his brow furrowed. He'd never received anything from the principal's office before. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Was he in trouble? Had he done something wrong without knowing it? He ran through the last few weeks in his mind, but came up empty. When the final bell rang, he walked to the office slowly, his frayed backpack feeling heavier than usual. The secretary waved him into Principal Vander's office without a word. The office was large, with a big window letting in the afternoon sun. Awards and diplomas covered the walls. Principal Vander sat behind a massive desk, a friendly, broad smile on his face. The student council president and vice president sat in two other chairs, smiling identical, polished smiles. "Leo, come in, Vander said, his voice too loud, too cheerful. "Sit down. Don't look so worried. This is good news." Leo sat on the very edge of the plush chair, his backpack on his lap like a shield. "We're planning the Spring Showcase," Vander began, spreading his hands wide. "And we want to make it special this year. We want to highlight the hidden talents in our student body, the quiet ones, the ones who might not normally step into the spotlight." The student council president nodded earnestly. "We think it's so important to give everyone a chance to shine," she said. Her voice sweet as syrup. Leo just listened, the knot in his stomach tightening. "So," Vander said, leaning forward, his eyes fixed on Leo, "we're calling it our surprise spotlight segment. And we've chosen you." The room was silent for a beat. Leo's voice, when he found it, was quiet. "Me? For what?" "For the piano," Vander said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. He gestured grandly toward the auditorium. "The grand piano on stage? We want you to play a piece for the school. At the showcase. In front of everyone." Leo's face went completely still. His eyes, which had been darting around the room, now fixed on a point on Vander's shiny desk. He didn't speak. He didn't move. The student council vice president jumped in, mistaking the silence for confusion. "It doesn't have to be complicated. Just, chopsticks or something. It's just for fun. To show school spirit." Principal Vander watched Leo's reaction closely. He saw the shock, the freeze. He saw exactly what he wanted to see. A kid terrified of the very idea. The prank was going to be perfect. "Well?" Vander prompted, his smile never wavering. "What do you say? Will you do it? For the school?" Leo finally looked up. His eyes moved from Vander's face to the smiling student leaders, then back to the principal. The silence stretched out, so long it became uncomfortable. Then, in that same quiet, flat voice, Leo asked a question. What would you like me to play? Vander was taken aback. He'd expected stammering, a frantic, I can't. Maybe even tears. Not this simple, direct question. He floundered for a second. Something classical, he blustered. Something that shows off the instrument. You know, impress us. Leo looked at him for another long moment. The air in the room felt thick. Then he gave a single, slow nod. It wasn't an excited nod. It wasn't a scared nod. It was just an agreement. A fact. Okay, Leo said Dot, and with that, he stood up, hoisted his backpack over his shoulder, and walked out of the office, leaving the three of them sitting in the suddenly too bright sunlight. Dot as the door clicked shut. Principal Vander let out a short laugh, breaking the tension. See? He's a good sport. It's all in good fun. The student leaders laughed too, a bit nervously at first, then with more confidence. They started planning how to spread the word. They wouldn't tell everyone the whole joke, just enough to create a buzz. Asterisk, wait until you see who's playing piano at the showcase. You won't believe it. Asterisk, the excitement of the prank fizzed between them. It was going to be hilarious. Dot out in the hallway. Leo walked toward the school's main doors. The afternoon sun hit his face as he stepped outside. He didn't look shocked or scared anymore. The blank stillness was gone, replaced by a deep, focused intensity in his eyes. He tightened his grip on the strap of his worn-out backpack and started the long walk home, a secret held tightly behind his quiet expression. A secret of black and white keys, and a promise made a long time ago to someone he loved. The walk home from school was always the same. Down the main road with the noisy traffic, left at the big oak tree that was starting to get its leaves back, and into the quieter streets where the houses sat close together. Leo usually used this time to let his mind wander, to shake off the noise of the school day. Dot today was different. His mind wasn't wandering. It was stuck like a record needle in a deep groove on one single moment, the principal's smiling face, asking him to play. He pushed the key into the lock of his home's front door. The house was quiet. His mom was still at work at the medical clinic and wouldn't be home for a few hours. The silence was a relief. He dropped his backpack by the stairs, the familiar thud a sound of home, and walked straight into the living room. There, against the far wall, was his piano. It wasn't a grand piano. It was an old upright, the dark wood scratched in places, the ivory of some keys yellowed with age. A faded photograph in a simple frame sat on top, a woman with kind eyes and a wide, warm smile, her arms around a much younger Leo, both of them sitting on a piano bench. His grandma. He didn't sit down right away. He just stood there, looking at the piano. The principal's words played again in his head. Asterisk, something classical. Impress us. Asterisk, he could still hear the faint, mocking echo underneath them, the unspoken laughter of the student council kids sitting in those plush chairs. A slow, hard feeling settled in his chest. It wasn't quite anger. It was clearer than that. It was understanding. He understood the game now. They didn't want to hear him play. They wanted to see him fail. They had picked the quiet kid, the kid with the old backpack, as the punchline to their joke. For a long time, playing had been just for him and the memory of his grandma. It was their private language. When she was teaching him, she'd say, "The music isn't in the notes on the page, child. It's in the quiet between them. It's in the weight of your heart on the keys." After she passed away, and they had to move here, the piano became his anchor. The one thing that didn't change. He played when he missed her. He played when the new school felt too loud and too lonely. He never played for anyone else. It felt too private, like showing someone a page from his diary. But now they were forcing his hand. They were turning his private world into a public joke. He finally sat down on the worn bench. He lifted the fallboard, revealing the familiar pattern of black and white. He didn't play. He just placed his fingers lightly on the cool keys, the way his grandma had taught him to feel the instrument's readiness. He knew exactly what piece they wanted. When people said classical to impress, they meant something big, something dramatic. They meant the music you hear in movies when something important is happening. They wanted a show. A specific piece began to form in his mind. It was a piece his grandma had called a mountain of a song. She said, "You don't conquer this one. You journey through it. It has storms and quiet sunrises in it." He had learned it for her, practicing for months until his fingers ached, just to see her proud smile when he finally played it through. He hadn't played it since she left. He opened the old, thick book of sheet music on the stand. The pages were soft at the edges from being turned so many times. He found the piece. The notes looked like a storm of tiny black dots crawling across the lines. He took a deep breath and began. The first notes were soft, a questioning melody. Then came the rolling bass, like distant thunder. His hands, which looked ordinary, even a bit clumsy holding a pencil in class, became something else on the keys. They were sure, strong, and gentle all at once. The music filled the quiet living room, loud and complex and alive. It wasn't just notes. It was feeling. There was loneliness in it, and a deep, aching kind of love, and a rising, powerful strength. He played through a difficult, rushing passage, his fingers flying, and for a minute, he was back in his grandma's old sunlit living room, and she was nodding along, her eyes closed. When the last low note faded into the silence of the house, Leo sat very still. His heart was pounding, but not from nervousness, from the truth of the music. He looked at the picture of his grandma. "Okay," he said softly to the empty room. "If they want a show, I'll give them a show. But it's going to be for you." Meanwhile, back at school, the buzz was starting. The student council president and vice president were masters at this. They didn't send a mass text saying, "Let's laugh at Leo." That was too obvious. They were smarter than that dot in the cafeteria the next day. The president would lean over to a table of popular juniors. "You will not believe who Principal Vander picked for the surprise act at the showcase." She'd say, her eyes wide with fake excitement. "Who?" Someone would ask double quotes Leo. You know, the quiet sophomore. "He's going to play piano." The reaction was always the same. A confused blink. "Can he play?" A shrug, a secret little smile. "Vander thinks it'll be a great way to include everyone." "It's so sweet, really. Brave of him to try, don't you think?" The word spread exactly as they wanted it to. Leo, piano, showcase. It became the school's little secret. People started looking at him in the halls, not with malice, but with a kind of curious pity. They'd see him at his locker and whisper, "That's him." Some felt bad about it. Others were just excited for the drama. The teachers even heard about it in the staff lounge. Most shook their heads, thinking it was a strange, potentially cruel idea, but none felt they could contradict the principal's inclusive project. Leo felt the eyes on him. He heard the whispers that stopped when he got close. He saw the smiles people tried to hide. He just kept his head down and kept walking. Inside, though, that clear, hard feeling grew stronger. He started staying after school, telling his mom he had a study group. He would go to the empty band room, where there was an old keyboard, and practice silently with the headphones on, his fingers moving over the unresponsive plastic, hearing the music only in his head. One afternoon, a week before the showcase, the band director, a man with kind eyes and a beard, noticed him. He'd heard the rumors, too. He walked over and tapped Leo on the shoulder. Leo pulled off the headphones, startled. "Practicing for the big show?" the band director asked, his voice neutral. Leo just nodded. The band director looked at him for a long moment. He saw a kid who was always alone, who never caused trouble. He didn't see a prankster or a class clown. He saw someone who looked very serious. You know, the band director said slowly, that stage can be a scary place. The lights are bright. The piano, the one out there, it's different from this. He pointed to the keyboard. The touch is heavier. The sound is bigger. It can throw you off if you're not used to it. Leo looked up at him. This was the first person who had spoken to him about it without a hidden smirk or fake cheer. Would it be okay? Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. If I sometimes tried it? The real one? When no one is here? The band director studied him. He saw the request wasn't from a place of fear, but from a place of focus. This kid wasn't planning to fail. He was planning to play. All right, the band director said. Come back at 4:30. The custodians will be around, but the auditorium will be empty. I'll leave the stage door unlocked for an hour. Just be careful with it. It's a fine instrument. That evening, Leo sat on the bench of the grand piano for the first time. It was immense. The black lid loomed over him like a wing. He pressed a single key. The note filled the vast, dark, empty auditorium, ringing out pure and deep and lonely. It was a totally different creature from his upright at home. It had more power. It demanded more control. He placed his hands on the keys, feeling their cool, smooth surface. He closed his eyes and played the first few bars of his piece. The sound was so huge it almost frightened him. It wasn't just in front of him. It was all around him, in the dark, empty seats. He had to learn to speak its language, to pull the beauty out of it without letting the power get away from him. He practiced there every night that week, in the dark auditorium, with only a single ghost light illuminating the stage. He wasn't just practicing the notes anymore. He was practicing for the silence of a watching crowd. He was practicing for the feeling of hundreds of eyes. He was preparing for a performance, not a prank. The night before the spring showcase, he sat at the grand piano for one last time. He played his piece all the way through. When he finished, the last chord hung in the air of the empty auditorium for what felt like a full minute. He knew what was coming tomorrow. He knew why he was really going to be on that stage. But as he closed the lid over the keys, a strange calm settled over him. The joke was on them. They were waiting for a stumble, for a silence. They were waiting for a punchline. He was going to give them truth instead. And he was ready. The night of the spring showcase felt different in the air. There was the usual buzz of a school event, parents finding seats, friends calling out to each other, the nervous energy of performers backstage. But underneath it all, running through the crowd like a low electric current, was a shared secret. People kept glancing toward the doors, waiting. They had come for the choir and the jazz band, sure, but they had really come for the piano. Backstage was a world of organized chaos. The choir members in their matching shirts hummed scales. The dance team stretched in a corner, their faces serious. And in a quiet nook, away from everyone, Leo stood. He wasn't in a costume. He wore a simple, clean button-down shirt and dark pants, clothes he'd had for a while but took care of. He looked at his hands, turning them over. They were steady. The student council president floated by, dressed in a sparkling top. She saw Leo and gave him a wide, bright smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Break a leg out there?" She chirped, her voice sugary. It was the kind of thing you said to a performer you believed in. From her, it sounded like a line from a play. Leo just nodded once, looking right at her until her smile flickered and she moved away. Principal Vander was in his element. He moved through the crowd in the front rows, shaking hands with parents, laughing a little too loudly. He looked confident, like a director before a play he had written himself. He checked his watch. The show was running on schedule. Soon it would be time. The acts went on. The choir sang well. The jazz band was tight and energetic. The audience clapped politely. But there was a feeling of waiting, a restless kind of patience. You could hear it in the rustle of programs, the soft murmurs between songs. Finally, it was time. The dance team finished their last number to strong applause. The lights on stage went dark for a moment as they ran off. The audience settled. This was the moment before the surprise. The stage lights came up, but only on the single microphone stand at center stage. Principal Vander walked out from the wings. The clapping was warm. He was, after all, the host. "Thank you, he said, his voice booming through the speakers. He smiled out at the crowd, a sea of shadowy faces in the dark beyond the bright lights. Wasn't that wonderful? What talented students we have here at Oak Ridge. He paused, letting the applause rise and fall again. He put on a more thoughtful, sincere face. It was a face he practiced. You know, he continued, his tone dropping to something more intimate. Sometimes, in a big school, talents can be hidden. Quiet voices can go unheard. Tonight, as part of our mission to celebrate every single student, we have a very special segment. We're going to call up a young man who embodies the spirit of trying something new, of stepping bravely into the spotlight. In the wings, Leo closed his eyes for a second. He took a deep breath that filled his lungs. He wasn't thinking of the crowd. He was thinking of the weight of his grandma's hand on his shoulder. He was thinking of the deep, quiet sound of a single piano key in an empty room. This is about courage, Vander said, laying it on thick. This is about giving everyone a chance to shine. He turned slightly, looking toward the side of the stage where Leo waited. So, would you please join me in giving a warm, encouraging Oak Ridge welcome to Leo? The applause that started was different. It wasn't the roaring cheer for the dance team. It was louder than polite, but it was scattered with whispers, with nervous coughs, with the sound of people shifting in their seats to get a better look. It was the sound of an audience waiting for a train wreck, trying to be kind about it. Leo walked out. The stage lights were hotter than he imagined. They made the hundreds of people in the audience vanish into a dark blur. All he could see was the outline of heads, the glow of exit signs. He walked past Principal Vander, who clapped him on the back with a heavy, false heartiness. "The stage is yours, son," Vander said into the microphone, his voice oozing fake pride. Then he walked off, leaving Leo alone in the circle of light. Leo didn't look at the crowd. He didn't smile or wave. He walked straight to the grand piano. It sat there, huge and black and beautiful, like a sleeping animal. He ran his hand lightly along its smooth side as he passed, a small, almost unconscious touch. He sat down on the bench. He adjusted it slightly, just an inch forward. The audience was utterly silent now. This was the silence they had been promised. The awkward silence. You could feel people holding their breath. In the front row, the student council members were frozen, their faces caught between smirks and a strange, growing tension. This was taking longer than they thought. The silence was getting deep. Leo placed his hands in his lap. He looked down at the keys, the pure white and stark black. He remembered his grandma saying, "The first note is the most important. It's the door. You have to open it with respect." He lifted his hands. He placed them gently on the keys, finding their places without looking. His posture was straight, but not stiff. He was not a scared boy anymore. In the bright light, he looked like a musician. And then he began. The first few notes were not loud. They were a soft, questioning melody, simple, almost fragile. A few people in the audience, let out the breaths they'd been holding. This was it. A simple little tune. Maybe chopsticks after all. But then, with his left hand, he played a low, rolling chord. It was like distant thunder. The gentle melody in his right hand continued, but now he was walking over a landscape that had just changed. The music began to build. It wasn't just notes. It was a story. The notes became faster, more intricate. They swirled and climbed, and then fell into moments of such quiet sadness that you could hear a pin drop in the huge room. Leo was gone. The boy on the stage vanished. What was left was the music. His body moved with it, leaning into the powerful parts, drawing back for the soft, aching passages. His fingers, which so many had imagined fumbling, flew across the keys with a certainty that was breathtaking. They weren't just hitting notes. They were pulling feeling right out of the air. The music swelled into a storm of sound, furious and beautiful, filling every corner of the auditorium. Then it would pull back to a single, clean line of melody, so lonely and pure it made your heart ache. In the front row, Principal Vander's confident smile had melted away. His face was pale. He stared, unblinking, as if he couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing and his ears were hearing. This was not the plan. This was not the awkward silence. This was an earthquake. The student council president's mouth was hanging slightly open. The smirk was gone, replaced by blank shock. The audience was not breathing together anymore. They were caught, completely trapped in the sound. Parents who knew music sat forward, their hands pressed together near their mouths. Students who had come to laugh were motionless, their eyes wide. Teachers exchanged glances of utter astonishment. The band director, standing in the back, gave a slow, knowing nod, his arms crossed. Leo drove the music forward. It was a battle and a lament and a triumph, all at once. The final minutes were a rushing waterfall of notes, a powerful, climbing cascade that seemed impossible for two hands to play. He played it perfectly. Every note clear, every emotion raw and real. And then, with a series of powerful, ringing chords that shook the floor, he finished. The last note hung in the air, vibrating in the strings of the great piano. And then it faded into a silence so total, so deep. It was like the world had stopped. For a long, long moment, nothing happened. The audience was still lost in the world he had built. They were still hearing the echoes of the storm. Then, someone in the middle of the crowd, a senior who didn't know Leo at all, clapped. It was a single, sharp, honest clap of pure awe. It broke the spell, and the room exploded. The applause was like nothing the old auditorium had ever heard. It wasn't polite. It wasn't encouraging. It was a roar, a tidal wave of sound. People leaped to their feet. They were shouting, whistling, stamping their feet on the wooden floor. The noise was physical, a wall of pure, shocked admiration. On stage, Leo finally moved. He took his hands from the keys and let them rest in his lap again. He took a slow, shaky breath. The storm inside him was settling. He looked out at the roaring, standing crowd, the blur of standing figures. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He just looked, his face calm, but his eyes were bright in the stage lights. He had opened the door, and he had walked right through it, leaving the joke, the prank, and the silence far behind him. All that was left was the truth of the music, ringing in everyone's ears. The roar of the crowd washed over the stage, a warm, physical wave of sound. Leo sat at the piano, letting it hit him. The bright lights made the standing, cheering figures in the audience look like shadows moving in water. He could hear individual voices now, shouting bravo and encore, words he'd only ever heard in movies. He took one more breath, the kind that reaches the very bottom of your lungs, and stood up. The applause swelled even louder. He saw faces now. The shocked, joyful faces of teachers. The stunned, open-mouthed expressions of students who had come to laugh. He saw his mom, near the back, her hands pressed to her cheeks, tears shining on her face in the dark. She knew he played, but she'd never heard that. Not like this. He walked to the center of the stage, toward the lonely microphone. The principal's microphone. The applause began to soften, not from fading interest, but from a new, prickling curiosity. What would he say? A simple thank you? An awkward bow? Leo reached the mic. He adjusted it downward, the stand squeaking slightly. The sound echoed in the now quieting hall. Every eye was fixed on him. You could hear the rustle of someone's program. A single cough from the back. He looked out, not at any one person, but at the dark shape of the crowd. His voice, when it came through the speakers, was clear. It wasn't the loud, booming voice of the principal. It was quiet, but it filled the space completely, because no one dared to make a sound. Thank you, he said. A simple start. He paused, his fingers lightly touching the cool metal of the mic stand. The piece is by Chopin. It's called a ballade. He said it not to show off, but to answer the question he knew was in thousands of minds. Asterisk, what was that? Asterisk. Then he looked down for a second, gathering his thoughts. The silence in the room was heavy, waiting. I learned it from my grandma, he said, and his voice changed just a little. It became softer, more personal. She was a pianist. She taught me everything I know, not just the notes, but what the notes mean, how they can hold feeling. He glanced toward the piano, a black giant in the light. This was our thing. When she passed away and we moved here, the piano was how I talked to her, how I remembered. I never played for anyone else. It was private. He looked back at the crowd. His gaze seemed to find the general area where the principal and the student council sat in the front rows. His voice didn't become angry. It became very, very clear. I knew why I was really called up here tonight. A ripple went through the audience. A murmur of understanding. The pieces clicked into place for every single person. The special segment. The surprise. The two bright smiles. They all saw it now, laid bare by his calm words. I saw the looks. I heard the whispers all week. He nodded slowly. I knew it was supposed to be a joke. That I was supposed to be the joke. In the front row, Principal Vander seemed to shrink into his seat. His face was a mask of frozen dread. The student council president looked at her hands. Her ears bright red. Leo's expression softened, not with forgiveness, but with something more powerful, certainty. So when Principal Vander asked me to play, he continued. I asked him what he wanted to hear. He said, something classical. Impress us. Leo gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. So I played the piece my grandma loved most, the one I learned for her. I didn't play it to impress you. He let that hang in the air for a heartbeat. The word you wasn't for the crowd. It was for the man in the front row. I played it for her. And he looked out at the sea of shadowy faces again, his voice finally warming, just a touch, for anyone who's ever been told to sit down and be quiet, to stay in their corner. He took his hand off the mic. Thank you for listening. He turned and began to walk off the stage. For the second time that night, the silence was broken. It started with a few claps, then a few more, and then it wasn't just applause. It was a storm of approval, of solidarity. It was louder than before, because now it wasn't just for the music. It was for him, for the quiet kid who had just spoken his truth with more dignity than anyone in the building possessed. Students were on their feet again, cheering, some even pumping their fists. The teachers clapped with a fierce, proud intensity. Backstage was chaos of a different kind. Performers who had been too busy to notice the prank were buzzing, asking each other, "Did you hear what he just said?" The dance team members, still in their glittery outfits, were staring at Leo as he walked past them, their eyes wide with new respect. He didn't stop. He walked straight past them all, through the backstage door and into the cool, quiet night air of the hallway behind the auditorium. He needed to breathe. Inside, the show was in disarray. The next act, a group doing a comedy skit, was completely forgotten. The principal had to go back on stage to try and get things moving again. His face was slick with sweat under the lights. His smile was a ghastly, trembling thing. "Wasn't that something?" He stammered into the mic. "A true surprise. Now let's hear it for our next act." The applause that followed was weak, scattered. Nobody cared about the skit. The night was already over. Leo had ended at dot in the lobby after the show. The story was the only thing anyone talked about. Parents clustered in groups, speaking in hushed, angry tones. "Did you know about this? What kind of principal sets up a child for humiliation? That was the most courageous thing I've ever seen." Students huddled together, their phones glowing. Social media was already exploding. Not with mockery, but with awe. Videos of the last minute of the performance, shaky and loud, were being shared with captions like, "Leo just destroyed the principal," and "Never underestimate the quiet kid." The narrative had flipped completely. The pranksters had become the villains. The punchline had become a hero. Leo avoided the lobby. He found his mom by their old car in the parking lot. She didn't say a word. She just pulled him into a tight hug that said everything. When she let go, she held his face in her hands, her eyes searching his. "Are you okay?" she asked. He nodded. "I am now," he said. And he meant it. The hard knot that had been in his chest for a week was gone. It had been played out into the music and spoken into the microphone at home that night. The phone started to ring. It was the band director. He just wanted to say how profoundly moved he was, and to offer Leo a spot as a featured performer with the jazz band anytime he wanted. Then a call from a local newspaper reporter who had heard from a parent. Then texts from numbers. Leo didn't recognize students from school. Simple messages like, "You were amazing, and so sorry about what happened." Leo turned his phone off. He went into the living room and sat at the old upright piano. He didn't play the ballade. He played a slow, gentle blues tune his grandma had taught him when he was first learning. It was simple. It was healing. Meanwhile, across town, Principal Vander sat in his dark living room, a single lamp on. He ignored his own ringing phone. He knew what was coming. The superintendent's number had already flashed on the screen twice. He replayed the night in his head, the shocking music, the damning speech, the looks on the parents' faces as they left. He had wanted a memorable moment. He had gotten one. It was a wildfire, and he had poured the gasoline himself. He thought of Leo's face, calm and sure at the microphone. The boy hadn't shouted. He hadn't cried. He had just stated the facts. And in doing so, he had taken Vander's little harmless prank and held it up for the entire town to see exactly what it was. Small and mean and cruel. The principal put his head in his hands. The joke was over. The consequences were just beginning. And Leo, the boy he'd never really seen until tonight, was finally, completely, seen by everyone. The quiet in the house the next morning was a different kind of quiet. It wasn't the empty quiet of being alone. It was the thick, buzzing quiet after a big storm has passed. Leo's mom had already left for an early shift at the clinic, but she'd left a note on the kitchen table next to a plate of toast. Proud doesn't even start to cover it. Call if you need anything. Love, Mom? Leo ate his toast slowly. He turned his phone on. It immediately chimed and buzzed, a flurry of notifications from apps and messages. He ignored most of them. One text was from the band director. The door to the band room is always open. No headphones required. That one made him almost smile. He knew going to school would be strange. He braced himself for it. But what he found when he walked through the front doors was something he hadn't fully expected, Dot. It wasn't cheers or a crowd. It wasn't like a movie. It was subtler. People looked at him, yes. But the looks weren't of pity or secret laughter anymore. They were looks of respect, of curiosity, of a little bit of awe. A senior boy he'd never spoken to, a tall guy from the basketball team, gave him a single, firm nod as they passed in the hallway. "That was sick, man," the guy said, and kept walking. A girl from his English class smiled at him. A real, genuine smile. "Hi, Leo," she said. The whispers were still there, but their tone had changed. They were about the music, about what he'd said. "Did you see Vander's face? I've never heard anything like that. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a person. Seen. It felt weird, and a little overwhelming, but not bad, Dot. The real change was in the atmosphere of the school itself. The principal's harmless prank had been a secret everyone was in on. Now the secret was out in the open, and it had spoiled. A feeling of embarrassment, of collective shame, hung over the student council and anyone who had been gleefully anticipating the joke. They walked quickly, eyes down. The power had shifted, Dot, in the principal's office. A very different kind of storm was brewing. The superintendent was there, her face stern. The school board had been flooded with emails and calls from furious parents overnight. It wasn't just about the prank. It was about the abuse of authority. It was about a principal who created an environment where a student could be used for public ridicule. Principal Vander, the man who loved a clean image, was trying to clean up a disaster of his own making. He was told there would be a formal review. His authority was suspended pending the outcome. The vice principal would be handling day-to-day operations, Dot, at an emergency assembly that afternoon. It was the vice principal who stood at the microphone, not Vander. Her voice was calm and serious. She addressed the events of the spring showcase directly. She talked about respect, about empathy, and about the profound courage it took to stand up with dignity. She didn't mention Leo by name, but everyone knew. She announced that the school would be starting a committee to look at student inclusion and how to prevent bullying, especially from positions of authority. It was a direct result of what had happened. The message was clear. The school itself was acknowledging a wrong had been done. For Leo, the most important thing happened in the week after the showcase. He was walking past the auditorium again. The doors were open. He stopped, peering in. The grand piano sat on the stage, lid closed, looking peaceful. "Go on in," a voice said. It was the band director, holding a stack of sheet music. "I was hoping I'd see you." Leo walked into the quiet auditorium. The band director followed him down the aisle. "A lot of kids have been asking me about piano lessons lately," the band director said casually. "Since the showcase. Funny how that happens." Leo just looked at the piano. "Thing is," the band director continued, "lessons cost money. Instruments cost money. Not every kid has a grandma to teach them, or an old piano at home." Leo thought of his worn backpack, the careful budgeting his mom did for groceries. He understood. "I was thinking," the band director said, "this auditorium is empty most afternoons. This piano just sits here, and we have a student who now knows what music can really do." Leo turned to look at him. "What if you didn't keep it private anymore?" The band director asked. "What if you showed a few other kids? Nothing formal. Just sharing it." You could use this space. After school. I'd be here to help, but you'd run it. A free music club. For anyone. The idea settled in Leo's mind. It didn't feel like a burden. It felt like the next right note in the song. His grandma hadn't hoarded her music. She had given it to him. It was a gift meant to be passed on. Yeah, Leo said, his voice quiet but sure in the big room. I could do that. The following Monday, a simple sign appeared on the bulletin board. Asterisk, asterisk, after-school music sessions. Asterisk, 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 learn the piano. No experience needed. Asterisk, 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 all are welcome. Asterisk, 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 meet in the auditorium. Tues, Thurs. 3:30 asterisk, 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 Leo asterisk, asterisk. He didn't know if anyone would come. That first Tuesday, he sat at the grand piano, his heart beating a little fast. At 3:35, a shy 7th grader peeked in. Is this the music thing? She asked. Then 2 more kids came. A boy from the football team who said he'd always wanted to learn. A girl who usually ate lunch alone in the library got Leo, didn't teach them Chopin. He started with the names of the keys. He showed them how to play a simple 5-note melody. He told them what his grandma had told him. It's not about being perfect. It's about the sound you make. It's yours. The club grew. Slowly, but it grew. It became a quiet sanctuary in the school. The piano that had been the instrument of a mean joke became a place of creation and connection. Leo found he liked teaching. He liked seeing the moment when someone first made a chord that sounded right, and their face lit up. As for Principal Vander, he never quite returned to his old position. The formal review found a pattern of poor judgment. He was transferred to a desk job at the district office at the end of the semester, far away from any students. The new principal was a quieter, more observant man who made a point of eating lunch in the cafeteria sometimes, talking to all kinds of kids, not just the ones in blazers. The spring showcase prank faded from daily talk, but it settled into the school's bones as a legend. A story teachers would tell in whispers to new staff. Remember, you never know what a student is carrying inside them. A story students passed down. You think that quiet kid can't do anything? You didn't hear about Leo, did you? One afternoon, months later, Leo was in the auditorium with a small group from his club. The football player was patiently practicing scales. The shy 7th grader was picking out a tune with one finger. The band director walked in and leaned against a seat in the front row, listening. When there was a break, he said to Leo, "You know, you changed things here." Leo looked around at the kids, at the piano, at the stage where everything had happened. He thought of the silence before he played, the roar after, the quiet words into the microphone. He hadn't set out to change anything. He had just wanted to play his music for his grandma. He had just refused to be the punchline. "I guess," Leo said, "sometimes the best way to stop a joke is to tell a better story." He turned back to the 7th grader. "Try that C again," he said gently. "Listen to how it rings." And in the sunlit auditorium, filled with the simple, struggling, beautiful sounds of beginners, the new story of the piano and of the quiet boy who played it continued.